The smell of gunpowder and scorched dirt hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as the SEALs flattened themselves against the rocky ground, pressing their faces into the coarse dust of the Afghan highlands. The ridge they'd been moving along moments ago was now a killing field, and every instinct drilled into them over years of brutal training screamed for them to stay low, stay invisible, stay alive. Incoming rounds cracked overhead, chewing up rock and soil, the sharp ping of ricochets echoing in their ears like a swarm of angry hornets. The mountain air was thin, cold enough to sting their lungs, but sweat slicked their backs beneath body armor as adrenaline surged. Chief Petty Officer Briggs, the team leader, lifted his head just enough to peer through the scrub and spot their attackers. His eyes, shaded by grime and exhaustion, caught the flicker of muzzle flashes farther down the valley, a fortified enemy position with the high ground, dug into stone bunkers that blended with the terrain. The enemy had them pinned. They'd been ambushed during exfil, caught in the worst possible place, a narrow goat trail with steep rock faces on one side and a drop that went hundreds of feet down on the other. Retreat wasn't an option, moving forward meant certain death. For now, survival meant becoming part of the ground they hugged so desperately. Briggs keyed his radio, his voice calm but clipped. Havoc 2, this is Havoc 1. We are pinned and danger close. Requesting air support. Over. He didn't expect an immediate answer. Air cover was scarce this deep in enemy territory, and even if support was en route, the valley was so tight it would take a miracle for a pilot to thread a bird through it without getting shredded by ground fire. The team's sniper, Petty Officer Morales, shifted slightly, his rifle nestled against his shoulder, scanning through his scope for targets of opportunity. He whispered a curse in Spanish as he spotted at least 2 PKM machine gun nests dug in among the rocks, their gunners disciplined and well supplied. These weren't ragtag fighters, this was an ambush planned with military precision. 250 meters, left nest, confirmed PKM, Morales whispered, finger poised but not firing. Firing would reveal their position, and right now, the only thing keeping them alive was their concealment. Briggs nodded silently, already weighing his options. They were 7 strong, all seasoned operators, but numbers and experience meant little when the enemy owned the terrain. Petty Officer Simmons, their comms specialist, crouched low, antenna flattened against the ground as he tried to punch a signal through the surrounding ridges. Static hissed in his ear. Trying alternate channel, Chief, he muttered, hands working with mechanical precision despite the chaos. The sound of incoming fire never stopped, single cracks from rifles, the harsh chatter of PKMs, and the occasional thump of RPGs hitting the mountainside, sending shards of rock raining down on them. Havoc 1, this is Angel 1, a voice finally crackled over the net, faint but clear enough to ignite a spark of hope. We have you on grid. Be advised, terrain is hot. Requesting vector for fire mission. Briggs' lips curled into the faintest smile. Angel 1 was a call sign he recognized. Captain Evelyn Valkyrie Kane, one of the best A-10 pilots in the Air Force. If anyone could fly an aircraft into this hellhole and come out alive, it was her. He keyed his MIC Angel 1, this is Havoc 1. We are danger close. Repeat, danger close. Need immediate suppression on coordinates Alpha Tango 497, break. Hostiles are dug in along the north ridge. Marking with smoke. He looked to Petty Officer First Class Ryan Doc Hall, their medic, who nodded and crawled to the edge of cover, pulling a smoke grenade from his vest. Hall yanked the pin and hurled it high, the canister arcing over the trail before bursting into a thick plume of red smoke that swirled in the mountain wind. For a moment, everything seemed to pause, the gunfire slowed as their enemies registered the signal. Somewhere overhead, far beyond the jagged peaks, Kane's A-10 Thunderbolt II was already screaming toward them, a flying beast armed with a 30mm Gu-8 Avenger cannon capable of turning armored vehicles into scrap in seconds. The SEALs braced themselves. Morales muttered a quick prayer under his breath. Simmons hunched lower, shielding his radio from the dust that whipped up with every passing breeze. Briggs checked his men with a glance, their faces streaked with dirt, eyes sharp and unyielding. These were warriors who had been through the worst the world could throw at them, yet in this moment, even they knew how close death was. They could feel it crawling along their spines, whispering at the back of their necks. Seconds later, a distant roar grew louder, the distinct growl of twin turbofan engines reverberating through the valley. Kane's voice came over comms, calm and confident. Havoc 1, tally smoke. I have visual. Stand by for a run. Keep your heads down. The SEALs hugged the earth tighter, fingers digging into the dirt. The sound of the A-10 filled the sky, a low thunder that made the mountains tremble. Then came the scream of the Avenger cannon, a mechanical roar so deep and guttural it felt like the earth itself was tearing apart. The first burst of 30mm rounds slammed into the enemy's northern ridge position, tearing through rock and steel with horrifying precision. Chunks of earth erupted into the air, flames licking skyward as the gun nests were obliterated in seconds. Morales watched through his scope as enemy fighters scrambled, their discipline shattered by the sudden, overwhelming violence. "Direct hit," he called, but his voice was drowned by the second pass of the A-10, Kane angling her bird so low she skimmed the ridgeline, her wings nearly clipping the peaks. Tracer fire reached up for her, but the Warthog was built for this, a flying tank with armor that could shrug off punishment. Kane's voice was steady as stone. "Angel 1, guns hot, second pass." The Avenger cannon roared again, and the SEALs could do nothing but press themselves flatter against the ground, trusting Kane's skill to avoid turning them into collateral damage. The explosions were closer this time, so close Briggs felt the shockwave ripple through his chest. Rock fragments clattered off their helmets. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm, to trust in her aim. Years of training told him that close air support at this proximity was the razor's edge between salvation and annihilation. Kane made it look effortless. Enemy fire faltered, then ceased entirely. The valley was momentarily silent except for the crackling of burning debris and the fading growl of the A-10 banking for another pass. Briggs took the opportunity to assess. "Status check," he said quietly over the team net. "Green," Morales replied, his sniper rifle still trained on the ridgeline. "Green," Simmons echoed, adjusting his headset. "Doc's green," Hall confirmed. One by one, the team checked in, all alive, all ready. Kane's voice came back, calm but sharp. "Havoc 1, be advised, enemy reinforcements inbound from the East Ridge. I've got eyes on a convoy. Marking targets." The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for the first time since the ambush began, Briggs felt the faintest surge of control returning to his hands. They weren't prey anymore. They had air support, and Kane was a predator like no other. The rumble of Kane's A-10 echoed through the jagged peaks like an angry god, the sound reverberating in the bones of every man on the ground. Briggs pressed his chest deeper into the rocky soil, adjusting his helmet as he scanned their surroundings. The smoke from Kane's first strike still hung thick in the cold mountain air, curling into the sky in blood-red wisps, marking where the PKM nests had been obliterated. Through the haze, Morales' sniper scope glinted as he swept for survivors, his breathing slow and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Movement, 2 o'clock, 150 meters, Morales whispered into the comms, his finger tightening against the trigger of his suppressed rifle. The crack of the shot was sharp but subdued, a whisper compared to the thunder of Kane's cannon, and Briggs saw a shadowed figure collapse among the rocks, a rifle clattering from his lifeless hands. Morales was already scanning again, unblinking, as if the kill hadn't registered. The lull was short-lived. A fresh volley of gunfire erupted from the east, the sound sharper and closer than before. Bullets chipped away at their cover, sparks flashing off stone. "Contact East Ridge." Simmons barked, rolling onto his side to grab his radio. Briggs' jaw clenched as he weighed their dwindling options. The enemy wasn't retreating, they were tightening the noose. From somewhere beyond the ridge, an RPG streaked through the sky, slamming into the cliff face just above their position. The blast showered the SEALs with debris, sharp rock fragments slicing through their uniforms. Hall, the medic, cursed under his breath as he shielded one of the team members from falling rubble. No one had been hit directly, but their precarious perch on the narrow trail was becoming a coffin. "Angel 1, we're taking fire East Ridge. Multiple shooters and RPGs. We need suppression now." Briggs barked into his comm. Kane's calm voice crackled back immediately, her tone as steady as if she were calling in a weather report. "Copy, Havoc 1. Visual on East Ridge targets. Danger close confirmed. Hold your positions." Briggs didn't need to tell his men twice. They pressed themselves flat, gripping their rifles tightly, eyes squeezed shut as Kane's A-10 came screaming in again. The sound was deafening, a mechanical roar that drowned out even the enemy's gunfire. Kane's Warthog swooped low, hugging the terrain with impossible precision. The nose of the aircraft lined up with the ridge, and the Avenger cannon let loose. The sound was more felt than heard, a gut-rattling vibration as streams of 30mm shells ripped through the sky and slammed into the mountainside. The enemy fighters never stood a chance. Rocks splintered and exploded, men and weapons alike were torn apart in a storm of metal, and the ridge became a cascade of fire and dust. The SEALs clenched their jaws and waited it out, trusting Kane with their lives. When the cannon finally fell silent, the only sound was the ringing in their ears and the echo of destruction rolling through the valley. "Clear on east," Morales muttered after a tense pause, his scope sweeping the ridge. No movement. No muzzle flashes. Just carnage. Briggs keyed his MIC good hits, Angel 1. East Ridge suppressed. Kane didn't waste time celebrating. Copy, Havoc 1. Be advised, I've got fast movers inbound to your position, looks like technical trucks with mounted weapons. 4 vehicles, about 2 clicks out, moving fast. Briggs swore softly under his breath. Whoever was coordinating this ambush wasn't playing around, they'd thrown everything at the SEALs, and now they were sending reinforcements. They couldn't hold this position forever, even with Kane overhead. Simmons, get higher ground comms if you can, Briggs ordered. See if we can get extraction. Morales, keep eyes on that convoy. Everyone else, ammo check. We're holding until we get the word. Simmons crawled to a slightly higher ledge, hugging the rocks as he fiddled with his radio's long-range antenna, trying to punch through the interference created by the mountainous terrain. Havoc Actual, this is Havoc 1, he said into the headset, voice low but urgent. We're pinned in Alpha Valley, grid coordinates updated. We have air support but need immediate extraction, enemy forces converging. Say again, immediate extraction. Static filled the air for a few agonizing seconds, and Briggs felt the tension coil tighter in his chest. Then a voice answered. Havoc 1, this is Havoc Actual. Roger your sitrep. Extraction en route. ETA 12 minutes. Hold your ground. 12 minutes, Briggs muttered grimly, glancing at his men. In a firefight, 12 minutes could feel like a lifetime. Copy that, Havoc Actual. We'll hold. He cut the comm and looked at his men, their faces set with grim determination. None of them complained. They were SEALs, they'd trained for this, lived for this. Kane's voice came back over the net, a lifeline of steel in the chaos. Havoc 1, convoy is moving through a canyon choke point. I can intercept. Confirm engagement authorization. Briggs didn't hesitate. Engage, Angel 1. Full suppression. Take them out. Copy, Kane replied, and moments later, her A-10 screamed overhead again, curving away toward the distant sound of approaching engines. The SEALs huddled low, catching their breath for the first time in what felt like hours, though it had only been minutes since the ambush began. Morales scanned every angle through his scope, Hall tended to minor scrapes and cuts, and Simmons kept trying to maintain a clean signal in case things went south. Then the sound came, an unmistakable, monstrous growl as Kane unleashed hell on the convoy. Even from 2 clicks away, the SEALs could hear the Avenger cannon tearing through metal, the sharp thud-thud-thud of shells detonating against armored vehicles. The enemy's plan was unraveling before their eyes. That's 3 down, Morales reported, listening to Kane's calm, clipped updates over the net. Scratch 4. Convoy neutralized. A cheer went up among the team, brief but fierce, a release of tension that had built like a coiled spring. Briggs allowed himself a thin smile. Nice work, Angel 1. Just doing my job, Kane replied, her voice calm but carrying an edge of satisfaction. I'll stay on station. Extraction bird should be inbound soon. The valley grew quiet, the smell of cordite and burning fuel heavy in the air. For a moment, Briggs could almost hear his own heartbeat over the faint crackle of the radio. They'd survived the initial assault, but his instincts screamed it wasn't over. The enemy had invested too much into this ambush to let them slip away so easily. He motioned for Morales and Simmons to reposition, scanning every ridge for signs of movement. The rest of the team adjusted their fields of fire, weapons trained on likely approach routes. Minutes crawled by like hours, the tension thick enough to choke on. Then, faintly, the whine of helicopter rotors reached their ears, growing louder by the second. Extraction was coming. Briggs keyed his MIC Angel 1, confirm visual on bird. Affirm, Kane replied. I've got eyes on a Black Hawk approaching from your 6. I'll cover your exfil. Move fast, Havoc 1. You're still in hostile territory. Briggs signaled his team. They began moving in pairs, sprinting low along the narrow trail, weapons ready, hearts pounding. The roar of the Black Hawk grew louder, and for the first time since the ambush began, Briggs felt a flicker of hope. They might make it. Out alive, the Black Hawk's rotors thundered overhead, the downwash kicking up a storm of dust and debris that stung the SEALs' eyes as they sprinted along the precarious trail. The bird was banking hard, hugging the ridge line to stay out of enemy sight, its side doors already open, gunners poised with mounted M240s sweeping the terrain. Briggs moved with his rifle raised, every muscle tight, his boots finding uncertain footing on the uneven ground. Behind him, Morales covered their rear, his sniper rifle swinging in smooth arcs as his sharp eyes scanned the jagged rocks above for any flicker of movement. The team had switched from holding ground to pure survival mode, every step bringing them closer to the helicopter's open bay, closer to escape. Kane's A-10 made another low pass overhead, her voice calm over comms. Angel 1, eyes on you. East approach is clear for now, but I'm seeing heat signatures moving on your west flank. They're coming hard, about 60 seconds out. Get on that bird, Havoc 1. Copy, Briggs barked, sweat dripping into his eyes as he motioned to Simmons and Hall to go first. The medic sprinted with fluid precision, his bulky kit bouncing against his side, Simmons on his heels with the radio still strapped to his back. Both dove toward the Black Hawk's door, the crew chief leaning out and hauling them aboard with practiced strength. Gunfire erupted from the west ridge a moment later, the sharp, high-pitched crack of AKs echoing across the valley. Bullets snapped overhead, some finding sparks off rock, others kicking up clouds of dust near their boots. Contact, west. Morales shouted, dropping to one knee and returning fire with surgical precision. Briggs turned, firing controlled bursts at the muzzle flashes he could see between the rocks, while the Black Hawk's door gunner unleashed a deafening barrage from his M240, tracer rounds stitching across the ridge. Move! Move! Briggs barked, motioning for Morales and Petty Officer Laird, their heavy weapons specialist, to break cover. Laird, a towering figure even under body armor, slung his M4 and grabbed the handle of his M249 saw, laying down a wall of suppressive fire as he ran, his gun's sustained roar drowning out the chaos. Morales sprinted low, keeping his sniper rifle tight to his chest, his breathing steady despite the intensity of the fight. Briggs was the last to break cover, moving with sharp, practiced efficiency, firing bursts at their pursuers as he backed toward the helicopter. He could feel the pressure of enemy rounds zipping past, the metallic whine of bullets too close for comfort. Kane's voice cut in over comms again, a calm thread of steel in the storm. Havoc 1, I've got your west flank. Guns hot. Get low. Briggs threw himself flat against the dirt as Kane's A-10 screamed overhead, skimming so close that the Black Hawk's rotor wash shook violently. The sound of the GAU-8 Avenger cannon was deafening, a rippling growl that tore through the air and slammed into the enemy position. The ridge erupted in a storm of fire and stone, explosions lighting up the sky in a blinding chain of devastation. Even hardened SEALs couldn't help flinching at the sheer violence unleashed in that moment. The enemy fire stopped abruptly, silence falling over the valley except for the ringing in their ears and the fading roar of Kane pulling up for another pass. Go! Now! Briggs roared, pushing himself to his feet and sprinting toward the helicopter. He grabbed the doorframe and hauled himself in, landing hard on the deck as the crew chief slammed the side door shut and signaled the pilot. We're all in. Briggs shouted, his voice hoarse from the adrenaline. The Black Hawk's engines roared as it lifted off, banking sharply away from the kill zone, the ground dropping away beneath them. The gunners leaned out of the doors, scanning the terrain below, while Kane's A-10 stayed overhead like a vengeful guardian, circling wide to ensure their escape route stayed clear. Inside the helicopter, the SEALs took a moment to breathe, their bodies shaking with the aftermath of battle. Morales sat against the cabin wall, rifle across his lap, eyes still sharp as if expecting another firefight. Laird was reloading belts into his M249 with calm efficiency, his big hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Hall moved between his teammates, checking for injuries, but aside from cuts and bruises, they were remarkably intact. Briggs wiped a streak of grime and blood off his face and keyed his radio. Angel 1, Havoc 1. We're airborne. You're a damn lifesaver. Kane's laugh crackled over the net, low and dry. Just doing my job, Havoc 1. I'll escort you out until you're clear. Briggs looked out the open door at her A-10 as it swooped low over the ridges, sunlight glinting off its rugged frame. The Warthog wasn't fast or sleek like a fighter jet, but in this terrain, in this fight, it was the angel of death, and Kane was its master. As the helicopter climbed higher, Briggs finally allowed himself to exhale, his shoulders sagging slightly. But his instincts wouldn't let him relax completely. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Whoever had orchestrated that ambush had intelligence on their route, their timing, and even their extraction plan. This wasn't some random skirmish, it was a coordinated attempt to wipe them out. Briggs' mind was already running through possibilities. Had their comms been compromised? Was there a mole feeding intel to the enemy? The questions would have to wait until they were out of the danger zone. The pilot's voice crackled through the cabin headset. ETA to FOB, 8 minutes. Buckle in. Briggs signaled his men to strap in, but his eyes stayed on the jagged mountains rolling beneath them. Kane was still out there, her A-10 swooping and circling with the patience of a hawk. Angel 1, what's your fuel state? Briggs asked. I've got enough for a few more passes if needed, Kane replied, her tone steady, almost casual, as if she hadn't just risked her life flying a tank through a canyon of death. You're clear for now. No movement on the ridges. I'll peel off once you're past the valley mouth. Copy that, Briggs said. He leaned back against the helicopter wall, but his grip on his rifle never loosened. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by the heavy, bone-deep exhaustion that always came after a firefight. Hall sat across from him, hands busy cleaning and rebandaging a scrape on Ladd's forearm, his expression calm and focused. Simmons was already pulling out his secondary radio gear, trying to patch into higher command to give them an updated situation report. The SEALs weren't the type to celebrate early. They'd been in too many fights, seen too many missions turn bloody at the last second. But Briggs could feel it in the cabin, the sharp edge of survival, the pride of professionals who'd stared death in the face and come out alive. Morales caught his eye from across the bird, gave him a small nod. Briggs returned it, no words needed. The helicopter banked again, and Briggs glanced out the door at the valley they'd just escaped. Smoke still curled into the sky from Kane's strikes, the ridges scarred with blackened craters. The ambush site looked like a war zone, but they'd gotten out. They'd lived. And the enemy, they'd paid a price. Kane's voice came over the net one last time before peeling away. Havoc 1, you're clear of my airspace. Good hunting. Copy, Angel 1, Briggs replied. Couldn't have done it without you. You owe me a drink, Kane said, a rare hint of warmth in her voice. Then her warthog banked away, climbing into the sun, and Briggs felt a strange emptiness as the roar of her engines faded. The Black Hawk kept pushing forward, carrying them toward safety, but Briggs knew this wasn't over. The enemy hadn't just stumbled on them, they'd known exactly where to hit. And that meant someone, somewhere, had betrayed them. The Black Hawk skimmed low over the rugged landscape, its engine screaming against the thin mountain air as the pilot pushed for every knot of speed. The team sat in silence, weapons across their laps, each man lost in the rhythm of the rotor blades thundering above them. The smell of gunpowder still clung to their gear, mixing with the metallic tang of sweat and the acrid scent of burnt cordite. Briggs kept his eyes fixed on the horizon, his senses sharpened even though they were technically out of the kill zone. Complacency was death. He'd been in too many situations where the ride home turned bloody, where enemies chased them down with everything they had. The mountains below looked deceptively calm, but he didn't trust it. Not for a second. ETA 6 minutes, the pilot's voice crackled through the headset, calm but tense. Briggs gave a silent nod, though the pilot couldn't see it. Across from him, Morales was stripping down his sniper rifle, checking for dust or damage from the ambush. His hands moved with practiced precision, mechanical and steady. Ladd, the heavy gunner, leaned against the side of the cabin with his saw across his knees, eyes half closed but alert, the kind of rest only seasoned warriors knew how to steal during lulls between battles. Simmons was still fiddling with the radio, patching through signals, his brow furrowed in concentration. Hall moved like a ghost between them, checking gear and glancing at each man, his medic's instinct always scanning for injuries they hadn't noticed in the chaos. Briggs keyed his MIC Havoc Actual, this is Havoc 1. We're outbound with bird in the sky. Sit rep on enemy pursuit. Static filled the headset for a moment, then a voice came through, clipped and formal. Havoc 1, Actual. No enemy activity detected beyond your last engagement zone. Air cover confirms all hot zones neutralized. Proceed to base. Briggs exhaled slowly but didn't relax. The fact that the enemy had staged such a well-coordinated ambush gnawed at him. These weren't just insurgents with old rifles and RPGs, this had been an operation, carefully planned with insider knowledge. Someone had fed them intel. Someone had betrayed them. Chief, Morales said suddenly, his voice low but firm. I've got movement. West Ridge. 2, no, 3 heat signatures. Briggs snapped his head toward the sniper, his pulse quickening. Morales never called something without confirmation. The sniper had switched his helmet optics to thermal and was scanning the landscape below through the open cabin door. They're tracking us, Morales said, his tone matter-of-fact, like he was reading off a weather report. Briggs moved to his side, crouching low to avoid the downdraft as he peered out. Sure enough, 3 faint orange glows stood out against the cooler terrain, moving quickly along a ridge line parallel to their flight path. Pilot, adjust heading. We've got potential pursuit on the West Ridge, Briggs barked. The pilot's calm voice came back instantly. Copy, Havoc 1. Adjusting. Gunners, keep your eyes open. The helicopter banked slightly, the gunners at each side door swinging their weapons toward the threat. Briggs keyed his MIC again. Angel 1, this is Havoc 1. We've got possible pursuit on West Ridge, request recon flyover if you're still in range. There was a pause before Kane's voice crackled through, calm and steady. Copy that, Havoc 1. I'm swinging back. Mark your location. Briggs glanced at Simmons, who was already transmitting coordinates. Within seconds, the roar of Kane's A-10 returned, a comforting sound that vibrated through the air like distant thunder. The team tensed, watching the ridges through their optics, waiting for her verdict. I see them, Kane's voice came, sharp with focus. 4 technicals. Mounted DSHKs. They're moving fast. Looks like they're trying to get ahead of you. Briggs swore under his breath. Heavy machine guns on those vehicles would shred a helicopter if they got close enough. Angel 1, you are cleared hot, Briggs said without hesitation. Take them out before they set up. Roger that, Kane replied, her tone almost too calm, and seconds later her A-10 dove into view, engines howling. The SEALs braced themselves as the Avenger cannon opened up, the sound like rolling thunder amplified 100 times. Streams of tracer rounds tore across the ridge, hitting with bone-shaking force. Through the swirling dust, Briggs saw the first technical erupt in flames, its gunner thrown backward like a rag doll. Kane didn't pull up, she banked hard and came around for another pass, her precision terrifying in its perfection. The second and third vehicles exploded in fiery bursts, black smoke curling into the sky. The fourth tried to flee, turning sharply down a ravine, but Kane was relentless. Her cannon barked again, and the vehicle disintegrated in a violent fireball. Threat neutralized, Kane reported coolly, her A-10 climbing out of the canyon. Briggs allowed himself a breath of relief. Angel 1, you just saved our asses again, he said. Appreciate it. That's my job, she replied simply. But Briggs could hear something else in her voice this time, a subtle edge, maybe fatigue, maybe the weight of what she'd just done. Kane had flown through hell to keep them alive, and she wasn't done yet. ETA 3 minutes, the pilot announced over the intercom. The SEALs stayed sharp, weapons ready, eyes scanning the terrain below. Even with Kane's cover, Briggs knew things could change in a heartbeat. He'd learned long ago that the final stretch of a mission was often the deadliest. He watched as Morales continued to scan with his optics, his face a mask of focus. The sniper wasn't just looking for enemies, he was memorizing terrain, cataloging every shadow, every movement. They broke free of the valley, the terrain flattening out slightly as the FOB came into view, a cluster of fortified buildings surrounded by HESCO barriers and guard towers. The sight was a relief, but Briggs didn't unclench. He kept his rifle close, scanning for any sign of trouble as the Black Hawk descended. Kane's voice came over the net one last time. Havoc 1, I'm breaking off. You're clear to land. I'll RTB for refuel. Copy, Angel 1, Briggs replied, and for a brief second, he wished he could see her in person, shake her hand, thank her properly. Stay safe out there. You too, she said, and then she was gone, her A-10 banking away into the endless sky, leaving only the distant rumble of her engines. The Black Hawk flared and descended rapidly, landing inside the FOB's perimeter in a storm of rotor wash. The SEALs were on their feet before the skids touched dirt, filing out in disciplined order, weapons at the ready despite being home. They moved quickly across the landing zone, heading for the safety of the blast walls. As they crossed into the relative calm of the FOB, Briggs felt the weight of the mission settle onto his shoulders. The ambush had been brutal, precise, and coordinated. Someone had known their route, their timing, even their extraction plan. This wasn't some random firefight, it had been a message. And Briggs intended to find out who sent it. The FOB was quiet in a way that only hardened soldiers could appreciate, calm, but with an undercurrent of tension that never truly left. The base sat nestled in a bowl of mountains, the rocky peaks surrounding it like jagged sentinels. Beyond the walls, the Afghan landscape stretched vast and unforgiving, a harsh reminder that safety was always temporary. The SEALs disembarked quickly, boots pounding on the packed dirt as they moved toward the main compound. The Black Hawk lifted off behind them, banking away to refuel, its rotor wash scattering dust across the yard. Briggs kept his rifle slung but ready, his eyes scanning the perimeter. Even in a secured base, habits like that were impossible to shake. You didn't survive missions like theirs by relaxing too soon. Inside the operations building, the fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow on maps and monitors spread across long tables. A few soldiers glanced up as Briggs' team entered, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect. word of the firefight had already spread through the FOB. SEALs didn't just come back from an ambush like that unscathed. The fact that all 7 of them had walked back through the gate alive was a testament to their skill, and to Kane's deadly precision in the sky. Briggs led his men straight to a briefing room, where a lieutenant waited with a tablet in hand. "Chief Briggs," the lieutenant greeted briskly, gesturing for them to sit. "We've been monitoring your feed. Hell of a fight out there." His tone was clipped, professional, but Briggs caught the edge in his voice. The kid was rattled. Watching a firefight unfold on drone footage was one thing. Being in it was something else entirely. Briggs didn't comment. He took the seat at the head of the table, removing his helmet and setting it down with a dull thud. The others followed, moving with the weary discipline of men who'd been running on adrenaline for hours. "Sit rep," Briggs said flatly, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. The lieutenant tapped his tablet, bringing up a satellite feed on the wall monitor. The ridge they'd been ambushed on appeared, black smoke still curling from the craters Kane's A-10 had carved into the rock. "We've analyzed the engagement zone," the lieutenant began. "Based on recovered drone footage and thermal imagery, the ambush was executed by a mix of local fighters and foreign operators. Gear was top tier, modern optics, encrypted comms, heavy weaponry. This wasn't a random attack." Briggs' jaw tightened. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill down his spine. "How'd they know our route?" Briggs asked. His voice was low, steady, but everyone in the room felt the weight of the question. Simmons looked up from his gear, his expression grim. The lieutenant hesitated. "We don't know yet. But intel suggests they were waiting for you specifically. This wasn't a target of opportunity." The SEALs exchanged glances, unspoken tension passing between them. They'd all been in enough operations to know what that meant. Someone had leaked their mission. Someone had betrayed them. Briggs leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "We're not moving again until we find the leak," he said firmly. "I'm not sending my men back into the field blind." The lieutenant nodded, clearly aware he was out of his depth in a room full of SEALs who just fought their way out of a death trap. "We've already started combing through comms logs and movement data. I'll get you everything we have." He excused himself, leaving the team alone. The moment the door closed, the room's atmosphere shifted. Morales leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Chief, whoever set this up knew exactly where we'd be. That ridge wasn't just good ground for an ambush, it was perfect. They had overlapping fields of fire, choke points, fallback positions. That wasn't luck." Briggs nodded, his mind already running through possibilities. "Agreed. Which means the leak isn't local. Someone with clearance fed them intel." He glanced at Simmons. "Get me a comms trace. I want to know if there were any unusual transmissions in the last 24 hours. Simmons nodded, pulling his laptop from his pack. His fingers flew over the keyboard, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. Laird, leaning back with his sword resting against the wall, finally spoke. "You think it's someone in the FOB?" Briggs didn't answer immediately. The thought had been gnawing at him since they'd first realized the ambush was too well planned to be random. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "But we're going to find out." The room fell silent for a moment, the only sound Simmons' quiet typing. Hall sat with his arms crossed, eyes scanning each man, his medic's mind cataloging not just their injuries but their mental state. They were tired, wired from adrenaline, but focused. This wasn't a team that broke under pressure, this was a team that sharpened. "Got something," Simmons said after a few minutes. He spun the laptop around to face Briggs. "There was a burst transmission sent about 3 hours before we stepped off. Encrypted, but I've seen this signature before. It's military grade, not local. Origin point was within 10 miles of our position at the time. Could have been relayed through a handheld or a vehicle-mounted system." Briggs leaned in, studying the data. His gut twisted. "So someone was close enough to watch us leave," he muttered. Morales' expression darkened. "That means they knew when and where we were going, not just the route. Whoever this is, they're not just feeding intel from a desk. They're on the ground." Briggs nodded slowly. "We'll loop in Kane. If there's another mission, I want her in the air from the start. Whoever these bastards are, they're organized, well-equipped, and they don't care about collateral. They wanted us dead." Ladd grunted. "Well, they failed." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The door opened again, and the lieutenant returned with a folder. "We've pulled stills from drone footage," he said, spreading out photos across the table. The images showed the ridge from above, enemy fighters moving with alarming coordination. Briggs studied them carefully, his sharp eyes catching details others would miss. Patches on their uniforms. The way they handled their weapons. Their formation. These aren't just local fighters, Briggs said flatly. He tapped a photo showing a man with a distinctive rifle grip. That's a Spetsnaz hold. And that PKM mount? That's Russian kit. Morales frowned. Russians? Out here. Not official, Briggs said, his voice low. Contractors, maybe. Mercenaries. But they're trained. And they're hunting us. The room went silent again, the weight of his words settling over them. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was personal. Whoever these mercenaries were, they'd tried to wipe out a SEAL team, and failed. Now they'd pay for it. Briggs leaned back, a cold resolve in his eyes. Gear up. We're not waiting for answers to fall in our lap. We'll find them, and we'll end this. Night had fallen over the FOB, and with it came a heavy stillness that felt unnatural. Briggs stood outside the barracks, his rifle slung across his chest, scanning the dark horizon. The stars overhead burned sharp and clear, a reminder of how far they were from civilization. The mountains loomed like jagged teeth against the night sky, and somewhere beyond them, their enemies were moving. Briggs' instinct screamed that the mercenaries weren't retreating, they were repositioning. Inside, the team was busy prepping gear for what was coming next. Morales was seated at a metal table, carefully loading magazines with practiced efficiency. Laird ran a quick inspection on his saw, its belt-fed ammo neatly stacked beside him. Hall was restocking his medic kit, methodically replacing every item they'd used in the fight. Simmons sat with his laptop open, a cord running from it into the base's comms network as he traced the encrypted transmission they'd discovered earlier. Briggs stepped back inside, his presence commanding immediate attention. "We move tonight," he said quietly, shutting the door behind him. The room froze for a beat, then Morales looked up. "You're sure?" Briggs nodded. "They'll hit us again. Maybe here, maybe out in the field, but they're not done. We take the initiative before they regroup." Simmons swiveled his laptop around. "Got something for you, Chief. That transmission we traced?" I backtracked the signal bounce. "It originated from a high valley, 15 clicks east of here. Makes sense tactically, it's a natural choke point with good elevation. Perfect for staging." Briggs studied the screen, then looked up at his men. "That's where we're going. Small unit. Fast, quiet. Kane will fly cover at first light, but we're going to be on the ground before they know we're there." Morales smirked, adrenaline already kicking in. "Good. I owe those bastards for earlier." Laird grunted in agreement, hefting his saw. Hall said nothing, but Briggs could see the same fire in his medic's eyes. They'd all lost friends over the years, and the ambush had come too close to adding their names to that list. They geared up in silence, each man slipping into the calm focus of a seasoned operator. Weapons checked, NVGs mounted, radios tested. The ritual was familiar, grounding. Outside, a Humvee waited to take them as far as the terrain allowed. After that, it would be boots on the ground. An hour later, the team was deep in the mountains, moving under the cover of darkness. The night was cool, the air thin, every sound amplified by the stillness. Their boots crunched softly on gravel as they climbed a narrow trail, rifles at the ready. Simmons led them by GPS, his eyes flicking between his screen and the path ahead. 2 clicks out, Simmons whispered into comms. Briggs raised a fist, signaling the team to halt. They crouched low, scanning the darkness. Through his NVGs, Briggs could see the faint outline of rocky ridges rising around them. The terrain was rugged and unforgiving, the kind of ground that favored defenders. If the mercenaries had chosen this valley as a staging point, they knew what they were doing. "Hall, Morales," Briggs whispered. "Flank right. Laird, Simmons, left with me. Keep it tight. No one fires unless I say." The team split, melting into the shadows. Briggs moved low and slow, every step deliberate. He scanned the ridge through his scope, searching for movement. A faint glimmer of light caught his attention, a reflection off glass, maybe. Binoculars. He froze, signaling Simmons to mark the position. They inched closer, and soon the faint outlines of enemy tents and equipment came into view. The mercenaries had set up a forward operating site, camouflaged netting stretched between rocks, crates of ammunition stacked neatly, and at least 2 mounted PKMs positioned to cover the valley entrance. Briggs' stomach tightened. This wasn't just a staging point, it was a base. Through the scope, he saw them, heavily armed fighters moving with military precision, their gear too advanced to be local. One man wore night vision goggles that looked straight off a NATO supply line. Another had a suppressed rifle, cradled like he knew exactly how to use it. These weren't amateurs. Briggs whispered into comms. We've got at least 20. Heavy weapons, overwatch positions. This is no small cell. Morales' voice crackled softly in his earpiece. Copy. I've got 3 on my side. Looks like they're setting claymores. Briggs cursed under his breath. Simmons, mark all known positions. Laird, get that saw ready, but don't fire until I give the word. Morales, Hall, set up a crossfire. They moved like ghosts, each man finding a firing position. Briggs slid behind a boulder, sighting down his rifle. The enemy base was a hive of quiet activity, unaware of the wolves stalking them. He keyed his MIC. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, send it. The first shot dropped a sentry instantly, his NVGs shattering with the impact. A split second later, Laird saw roared, stitching a line of fire across the camp. Morales opened up from the flank, his rounds tearing through crates and tents. Chaos erupted as the mercenaries scrambled for cover. Briggs squeezed off precise shots, every trigger pull finding a target. The enemy fought back hard, but they were caught flat-footed. Explosions from their own crates lit up the valley as stray rounds struck supplies. Briggs moved quickly, switching positions between bursts. He saw one mercenary dive behind a mounted PKM, trying to swing it toward Laird's position. Briggs shot him through the chest before he could fire. Hall, Morales, push right. Briggs ordered. The 2 operators moved in, laying down suppressive fire as they advanced. Laird kept the saw thundering, forcing the enemy to stay pinned. Simmons worked his rifle like a scalpel, each shot clean and deliberate. The fight was brutal but short. Within minutes, the mercenaries were either dead or fleeing into the dark mountains. Briggs signaled a ceasefire, scanning the valley through his NVGs. Smoke rose from burning crates, casting eerie shadows across the rocks. The silence that followed was deafening. Clear, Morales reported. Clear, Hall echoed. Briggs exhaled slowly. Good work. Sweep the camp. Grab intel, weapons, anything useful. Then we're out. They moved quickly, rifles still ready as they searched the site. Hall knelt beside a wounded mercenary, his hands slick with blood as he tried to get answers. The man was dying, but his last words were chilling. They know, you're coming, he rasped in a heavy accent before going limp. Hall looked up at Briggs. He wasn't talking about this raid. There's something bigger coming. Briggs felt a chill settle over him. He moved to a crate, prying it open. Inside were encrypted radios, stacks of foreign currency, and, most disturbing, maps of the region with multiple fobs marked in red. His gut twisted. This wasn't just about them. This was a coordinated campaign. Chief, Simmons called from a laptop he'd recovered. You'll want to see this. Briggs crouched beside him, scanning the screen. It was a roster, names, and photos of American operators. Their team was listed at the top. Next to each name was a single word, eliminate. Briggs' jaw tightened. Pack it all. We're getting this back to command. Now. The night felt heavier as they exfiltrated, every shadow a potential threat. The enemy wasn't just hunting them, they were running an operation that reached far beyond this valley. And now, Briggs knew they'd just stepped into something much bigger than an ambush. The ride back to the FOB was silent except for the rumble of the Humvee's engine and the soft crackle of comms traffic in Briggs' earpiece. No one spoke. Each man sat in his own thoughts, weapons resting across their laps, eyes scanning the black terrain rushing past. The night air was cold, and the smell of burned gunpowder and smoke still clung to their gear. Briggs sat in the passenger seat, his mind racing through everything they'd found in that valley. Those maps. Those names. The laptop full of kill lists. This wasn't just a hit squad, they were part of something much bigger. Whoever these mercenaries were, they weren't freelancers. They were organized, funded, and working with intel that no one outside their own circle should have. Briggs couldn't shake the unease curling in his gut. 2 minutes out, the driver murmured. Briggs gave a curt nod, gripping his rifle tighter. The FOB came into view, floodlights cutting through the dark. A guard tower signaled their approach, and the gate opened to let them in. Once they were inside the wire, Briggs exhaled, but only slightly. Safety was always temporary. They dismounted quickly, unloading their gear. Simmons secured the laptop in a hardened case, while Hall hauled a blooded duffel full of captured documents and comm equipment. Morales slung his rifle over his shoulder and cracked his neck. Feels like this isn't over, Morales muttered, scanning the perimeter. It's not, Briggs said flatly. He motioned for Simmons to follow him into the command center. Let's see what kind of hornet's nest we just kicked. Inside, the air was thick with the hum of electronics and the low chatter of operators coordinating patrols. Briggs handed the laptop to an intel specialist, who immediately began extracting files. On a nearby table, Hall spread out the maps they'd taken from the Merc camp. Red circles marked several FOBs in the region, not just theirs. Some circles had check marks next to them. These look like targets, Hall said grimly. Briggs leaned over the table, studying the marks. Confirmed kills, he murmured. They've already hit some of these. Simmons tapped the laptop screen. And this? This isn't just intel. This is surveillance. They've been watching us for weeks. Impossible, Ladd grunted. Would have spotted recon teams. Simmons shook his head. Not if they're using drones. Small ones. Low signature. They'd only need a few minutes overhead to gather data. Briggs straightened, his jaw tight. We're not just facing mercs. We're up against a well-funded unit with tech and intel that rivals ours. Somebody's bankrolling this. The intel specialist turned from the laptop. Sir, you'll want to see this. On the monitor was a feed of encrypted messages pulled from the mercenary system. Most were in code, but a few had been partially decrypted. One phrase stood out, Operation Black Spire. Briggs frowned. Never heard of it. The specialist shook his head. Neither have I. But it's everywhere in their comms. Every order, every map reference, it's tied to Black Spire. Hall crossed his arms. Could be a contract name. Or worse, a larger op they're running. Morales slammed a fist lightly against the table. So, what now? We sit here and wait for them to come back swinging. No, Briggs said sharply. He turned to the team. We hunt. But this time, we're not alone. An hour later, the team gathered in the briefing room with their commanding officer, Colonel Harris. The colonel was a hard man, with deep lines on his face and eyes that burned with intensity. Briggs laid everything out, the maps, the kill lists, the decrypted comms. Harris listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Briggs finished, Harris leaned forward, steepling his fingers. You're telling me a rogue paramilitary group has eyes on every FOB in this sector? That they've already hit at least 3, and they're planning more? Yes, sir, Briggs said. And judging by their equipment and coordination, they're not working alone. Someone's backing them, someone with resources. Harris nodded slowly. This complicates things. He glanced at the intel officer. How soon can you trace their comms? Not soon enough, sir, the officer admitted. They're using rotating encryption protocols I've only seen in black budget programs. We'll need more data. Harris turned back to Briggs. Then get it. You're cleared for full recon authority. I'll divert a drone to cover your sector, and I'll get you satellite time. Find these bastards and end this. Briggs saluted. Yes, sir. As the team filed out, Briggs caught Morales' eye. The sergeant smirked faintly. So, we're going hunting again, here? Briggs gave him a rare grin. Wouldn't have it any other way. 2 hours later, the operators were back in the field. The plan was simple: shadow the routes leading out of the valley they'd raided, track any survivors, and find the next staging point. Simmons had rigged a portable antenna to intercept short-range comms, while Ladd carried extra ammo belts. Hall moved silently, scanning every shadow, and Morales was already itching for a fight. They traveled light, moving quickly through the moonlit terrain. The mountains loomed high and jagged, the wind cutting through their gear. Every few minutes, Briggs stopped to scan the horizon through his NVGs. The night was quiet, too quiet. At the edge of a narrow ravine, Simmons crouched low, adjusting his gear. Got something, he whispered. Encrypted chatter, close. Less than 2 clicks out. Briggs motioned for silence and signaled the team to spread out. They moved like ghosts, slipping between rocks and scrub. Ahead, a faint glow flickered, a campfire, barely visible behind a cluster of boulders. Through his scope, Briggs spotted 2 mercenaries sitting near the fire, rifles propped nearby. He tapped his MIC-2 targets. Likely scouts. We take them alive. The team moved in with surgical precision. Morales circled left, while Hall crept in from the right. Briggs advanced straight on, his rifle raised. In seconds, they were on top of the mercs. One reached for his weapon, but Morales had him pinned before he could react. Hall subdued the other with a swift strike to the temple. The men were bound and gagged, dragged away from the campfire. Briggs knelt in front of one, pulling off his gag. "Talk," Briggs said softly. "Where's your base? Who's running this?" The merc spat at him. Briggs didn't flinch. "Wrong answer." He nodded at Simmons, who connected a small device to the merc's radio. "We'll find out either way." The device began scanning for frequencies, pulling data from the comm. Briggs' patience was thin. He grabbed the merc by the collar. "You're not a martyr. You're a paycheck. So, either you start talking, or you won't live to see another deposit." The man's resolve faltered. You don't know who you're up against," he stammered. "Black Spire, they're everywhere. We were told to take you alive. Briggs. All of you." Briggs' blood ran cold. "They know my name." The merc nodded shakily. "Your whole team. Your high-value targets." Briggs tightened his grip. "Why?" The man swallowed hard. "Because, you're the only ones who can stop them." Before Briggs could press further, a distant crack split the night. The merc's head snapped back, and he slumped forward, dead. "A sniper. Contact!" Morales shouted. Bullets tore through the ravine. The team dove for cover as tracer rounds lit up the night. Briggs barked orders, adrenaline surging. They were pinned down. Whoever these people were, they were fast, ruthless, and closing in. Bullets sparked against the rocks as the team scrambled for cover. Briggs pressed his back to the jagged cliffside, scanning the ridge for muzzle flashes through his NVGs. The mercenary's lifeless body slumped at his feet, a grim reminder that their enemies weren't just skilled, they were prepared, watching, and one step ahead. "Snipers got elevation on us." Hall shouted over the gunfire, ducking as a round cracked overhead. "North Ridge." Morales barked, shouldering his rifle and returning fire in controlled bursts. "Suppressive fire. Move now." Briggs ordered. Simmons threw a smoke grenade, and the team vanished behind a cloud of thick gray plumes. Under its cover, they sprinted across the ravine, leaping over rocks and sliding behind boulders. The sound of gunfire echoed off the canyon walls, a chaotic orchestra of death. Hall, flank left. Briggs snapped. "Morales, right with me." Simmons, cover. The team split. Hall disappeared into the dark like a shadow, while Simmons laid down precise fire to pin the sniper's team. Briggs and Morales climbed higher, their boots slipping on loose gravel. The enemy fire intensified as if sensing their movement. "Two shooters now," Simmons warned. "Different angles." "Figures," Briggs muttered, breathing hard as he crawled up the slope. A sudden glint caught his eye, a scope reflecting moonlight. Briggs steadied his rifle and fired twice. One merc went down, tumbling from his perch with a sickening thud. "That's one," Morales yelled, lobbing a grenade toward the second sniper's nest. The explosion lit up the mountainside, and silence briefly followed before more shots rang out. "They've got reinforcements." Hall's voice crackled over comms. "4 more inbound, fast." Briggs clenched his jaw. This wasn't a random skirmish. This was a kill box. Someone had fed the mercenaries their position and orchestrated this ambush. "Fall back." Briggs barked. "Regroup at fallback point Echo." The team moved with practiced precision, bounding backward in pairs while Simmons covered their retreat. Grenades exploded behind them, showering dirt and rock. Briggs grabbed Simmons' vest, dragging him behind cover when enemy fire chewed up their previous position. They sprinted through the ravine, hearts pounding. By the time they reached Echo, a shallow cave tucked behind a waterfall, they were breathing hard, their gear caked in dust and sweat. Morales was the first to speak, his voice ragged. "They knew exactly where we'd be. This wasn't chance." "No kidding," Hall growled, wiping blood from a shallow cut on his forehead. "We've been burned." Simmons was already setting up his portable comm rig, fingers flying over the controls. "I'll jam their frequencies. Buy us some time." Briggs knelt, his mind racing. Someone had leaked their location, and the mercs were operating with near-military precision. This wasn't just a rogue op. This was a war being fought in the shadows, and they were at the center of it. He turned to Simmons. "How fast can you triangulate their comms?" "Already on it," Simmons said. "Give me a minute." They waited in tense silence, weapons trained on the cave entrance. The distant sound of gunfire faded as the mercenaries searched the ravine, unaware of their exact position. Simmons' screen beeped softly. "Got something. Strong signal, encrypted, but it's close. Less than a click away. Could be a command node." Briggs' eyes narrowed. "We take it out. Tonight." Morales cracked a grin. Thought you'd never say that. The team moved under cover of darkness, their boots silent on the damp ground. Simmons led them through the terrain, following the signal's trace. As they crept closer, faint voices and the glow of electronics came into view. A small cave served as a forward command post. Several mercenaries were huddled around a satellite uplink and multiple laptops, their rifles within arm's reach. Briggs motioned for silence, then signaled positions. Hall and Morales flanked left, Simmons right. Briggs counted down silently. 3, 2, 1. They struck like lightning. Suppressed shots took down 2 guards instantly. Morales charged in, striking another across the jaw with his rifle butt. Simmons cut power to the uplink, plunging the cave into darkness. By the time the mercs realized they were under attack, it was too late. Briggs had his rifle leveled at the last man standing, a pale, sharp-featured operator who looked far too calm for someone staring down death. "Hands up," Briggs ordered. "Now." The man smirked. "You're good. Better than I expected." Briggs stepped closer, pressing the barrel against his chest. "Who are you working for?" The man shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You won't stop it." "Black Spire," Briggs said. "What is it?" The man's smile widened. "You really don't know? Black Spire isn't an op. It's a program. A network. It's already here." Briggs' trigger finger twitched. "Talk." "You're wasting time," the merc said, glancing at the uplink. "You think cutting that off will stop us? There are more nodes. More teams. You're too late." Before Briggs could respond, the man lunged, not for a weapon, but for a small detonator clipped to his vest. Briggs fired instinctively, the round punching through his chest. The detonator fell from his hand, but not before a faint red light blinked once. "Move!" Briggs shouted. The team dove for cover as explosives hidden in the uplink ignited. The blast rocked the cave, sending debris and fire raining down. Briggs shielded his face as heat and smoke engulfed them. When the dust settled, the uplink was nothing but molten wreckage. Simmons coughed, waving smoke from his face. That was close. Briggs scanned the destroyed equipment, fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. "He'd rather die than let us get intel. Whatever Black Spire is, it's big." Hall kicked a broken laptop. "Now what? We're blind." Briggs glanced at Simmons, who was already salvaging parts. "We're not blind," Simmons said grimly. "He triggered a failsafe, but I caught a trace before the system fried. There's a central hub. Coordinates are about 50 miles east. If we hit it, we end this." Briggs nodded. "Then that's where we're going." By dawn, they were closing in on the hub's location. The satellite feed provided by Colonel Harris confirmed it was heavily fortified, a sprawling compound nestled deep in the mountains, with guards, drones, and anti-air systems. "This isn't a merc base," Hall muttered, studying the live feed. "This is military grade." "Which means Black Spire isn't rogue," Simmons added. "This has government funding. Maybe multiple governments." Briggs adjusted his gear, eyes narrowing. "Doesn't matter. We're taking it out." Morales grinned. "Now you're speaking my language." The assault began at dusk. Under cover of drone interference and carefully timed diversions, the team infiltrated the compound. Briggs led them through the shadows, eliminating sentries with silent precision. Inside, they found rows of servers and advanced communication arrays, proof that Black Spire wasn't just a mercenary group. It was a global network, coordinating covert strikes across multiple continents. "Download everything," Briggs ordered. Simmons worked quickly, pulling files onto encrypted drives. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights bathed the room in an ominous glow. Guards stormed the corridors, rifles raised. "Contact front!" Hall shouted. The firefight erupted. Bullets tore through the air as the team fought their way to the extraction point. Morales lobbed grenades, clearing hallways, while Hall covered their flank. Simmons clutched the drives like gold, knowing the intel they carried could change everything. As they neared the exit, a squad of heavily armed mercs blocked their path. Briggs didn't hesitate. He charged forward, firing in short, brutal bursts. Morales followed, roaring like a madman. When the smoke cleared, the team stood blooded but alive. They sprinted through the compound, racing toward the waiting extraction chopper. Behind them, explosives they planted erupted, turning the Black Spire hub into a fireball. The roar of the helicopter's rotors drowned out everything else. Briggs hauled Simmons aboard, then Hall and Morales. As they lifted off, the compound burned beneath them, a beacon of their defiance. Simmons handed Briggs the drives, his face pale but triumphant. "We got everything." Briggs stared down at the inferno, his expression unreadable. "This isn't over," he muttered. "But it's a start." Morales clapped him on the shoulder. "Hell of a start." As the chopper vanished into the dawn sky, the first rays of sunlight touched the mountains. Black Spire wasn't gone, but it was wounded. And Briggs' team had just declared war. The end.